Okay, welcome to Monito's monthly recap for April. We had lots to discuss today, including a Klarna IPO that's been delayed and a few other things. But we've decided that we're going to stick to Revolut in this episode because they just released their financial report for 2024. And there's some really interesting figures in there and some interesting wording of certain goals and targets that I want to talk about. Nikolai Storonsky's ambition, the CEO of Revolut, is huge, and he's made it quite clear in this financial report, even though the numbers are extremely impressive, particularly the amount of users they've achieved and the revenue growth they've achieved, the transaction volume they're getting. The numbers are astronomical, but in Nikolai Storonsky's eyes, it's just the beginning. There's some really interesting and fun things that I want to discuss and Jan wants to discuss. So we're going to get into the financial report for 2024 for Revolut. And also there is some conversation around a rewards credit card coming out of Revolut that could take on the likes of American Express, could take on the likes of Chase in the States. And, you know, if you're familiar with the credit card Yonder, this could be something that could not take on Yonder necessarily because they've got 30,000 users. They're hardly going to challenge Revolut at this point, but they have a certain model of credit card that's very interesting that it could appear that Revolut are trying to or considering emulating because of their current model of rewards points, aka Rev points, and they have some similarities with Yonder. So there's some really interesting discussions to be had. So Jan and I have decided that we're going to dedicate this episode to solely talk about Revolut and predominantly that financial report that just dropped. Jan, how are you?
Yeah, I'm doing great, Johnny. Thanks for having me here again. And thanks for the nice intro. I'm excited to talk about Revolut. And as you mentioned, the ambition of Revolut is tremendous. But maybe before we start, just one thing to clarify. It has to be, right? Because they're valued at $60 billion. And even making $1 billion a year is, it's just a fraction of that, right? And they have to live up to this valuation in order to satisfy their investors.
Yeah, there's a lot of pressure on them, on those shoulders of Nikolai Storonsky and Vlad Yatsenko, the co-founders. They've got a lot of pressure on their shoulders. You know, the shareholders, the people who've invested money in Revolut, they're going to be gunning for them. They're going to want to see profit. They're going to want to see revenue growth year on year. And how are they going to provide that? Well, looking at let's not jump ahead to where they're generating the revenue first, or the where the profit's generating from. I don't want to get too far ahead yet. Let's talk about the high level numbers first and what they're showing and what we've seen from this report. Revenue grew by 72% year on year, reaching 3.1 billion pounds or $4 billion. Comparatively to 2023, they hit $2.2 billion. So there's a huge amount of revenue growth there. And that equaled a net profit which more than doubled to 790 million pounds or $1 billion. So they've hit a net profit of $1 billion. Barclays are making roughly 5.3 billion pounds in net profit. So that's profit after tax, and that's compared to Revolut's 790 million pounds. So Barclays are, 5x Revolut for profit, but Barclays are a legacy bank. We think of these banks as challenger banks, Revolut, Monzo, Starling. But when you see those numbers, when you see how their net profit is closing in on some of these legacy banks, they're no longer the challenger bank. They're the bank to challenge. They're the bank that Barclays, HSBC, Bank of America, they need to be looking at and thinking, we now need to challenge them. And I think it's probably too late now. I don't know if you would disagree with this, Jan, but I think it's too late now for a bank like Barclays to try and acquire Revolut, because they have that significant valuation. But like the likes of Monzo and Starling, which don't have the same number of customers as Revolut, they don't have the same revenue or profit, probably could be acquired.
Yeah, absolutely, Johnny. As you suggested before, it's very unrealistic that a legacy bank like Barclays could come up with the capital to acquire Revolut. In fact, Revolut is already more valuable than Barclays currently. Barclays' market capitalization sits at around 42 billion pounds, if I'm not wrong, and Revolut is at $60 billion. What's that in pounds? I think roughly 50 billion pounds, right? Today's exchange rate. So what a lot of those legacy banks are doing is they try to come up with innovation in-house. They start challenger banks themselves, and then they try to develop those into standalone products,
which never seems to work as well.
So far, it hasn't worked. It's a difficult process, and but I guess they they have some pressure as well from their shareholders to do something innovative in order to capitalize on the internet and digitalization.
I'm like envisaging this big boardroom at like Barclays HQ, blacked out windows, smoking, and they're like, we've got to come up with a way to try to beat this damn Revolut. Like someone's banging the table, like, God damn Revolut. They should be concerned. I mean, in this report, their customer base expanded by 38% to 52 million customers. They grew by 14.5 million customers in 2024 alone. And when I talked about earlier about how, they're no longer a challenger or a fintech that could be acquired, but maybe Starling and Monzo could. Well, Starling and Monzo, their total customers account to about 14 to 15 million in total. And Revolut have been able to accumulate that many customers in just a year alone.
Why is Revolut growing so much faster than the competition?
Referrals, spamming inboxes, offering you money to refer your friends.
I received one today. You too.
Every day. And the money always changes. And it's still cash, it's not Rev points, which is probably very wise, Revolut. And I do wonder how long that will stay, how long that will continue. I don't know if there's a compliance hindrance there, potentially, if they're trying to get fully authorized, and eventually that might be a problem if they're a fully authorized bank, because you don't see many banks spamming you with referral links to get other people to sign up. Although banks do in the UK, Jan, I'm not sure about Europe, but banks in the UK do offer financial incentives to sign up, like First Direct. That's probably one of the reasons. Those referrals are probably one of the reasons why Revolut have been able to grow so much. Word of mouth. I mean, word of mouth has been one of the predominant growth strategies, I suppose, or one of the reasons why Monzo have grown so significantly, and Revolut have had that as well. They've had word of mouth. They've had fantastic rates, exchange rates. They've had low fee-free banking for so long that that has been easy to sell to your friends. It's been an easy thing to recommend. But as the necessity for profit increases, as the shareholders start to exert pressure as the board starts to exert pressure on the CEO, the co-founders of Revolut to earn more money, then those referrals, those incentives, the reason why you might tell your buddy about Revolut, that might change and we're seeing it now, right? Jan, you've noticed exchange rates, for example, aren't as favorable as they were because those were some of the key drivers for people to sign up. So I guess holding on this incredible increase in customers for a moment, Jan, do you think this is sustainable if you're on a path for greater profitability?
Yeah, it's going to be really difficult, to be honest, Johnny. But I think that probably the average Joe, let's say, he's probably not really looking at the exchange rates as much as I do. And what the average person is gonna notice is that Revolut offers a good exchange rate, and they still do, right? It's just that other neobanks are currently better. There is, in fact, a small exchange rate margin in there. That's why I personally prefer other payment methods if I have access to them. But I assume that most people, they might have Revolut alongside their standard legacy bank, and in comparison, Revolut is still much better. So maybe they don't even need to offer the best rates on the market, right? Maybe it's good enough if they have decent rates, and that's enough reason for people to recommend them. And let's be honest, it's a great product. It's very versatile. Which bank allows you to buy insurances from within your banking app, or book hotels from within your banking app, book experiences directly from within your banking app, purchase stocks, bonds were just launched, I think in 2024 as well, and many other things. That's very unique in my opinion. And if people have been recommending Revolut so far, I believe they will keep doing this. There's no reason not to, even with slightly higher fees.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. When I was thinking about other reasons why Revolut's growth has been so astronomical, and I think one of the reasons is innovation. And it's like what you're talking about, these products, these offerings that Revolut have available, they make them unique to other banks and other e-money institutions. Like, look at some of the way they've packaged these partnerships with Masterclass, with Chess.com, with Perplexity, with Tinder. Those offers, they're not available elsewhere where you can see this package of things, of subscriptions that you use. Oh, and if, as a result of getting those subscriptions in this package, you're also going to get this great access to a fantastic travel card, to some relatively competitive savings rates, which most people will probably be very happy with. Like you said, access to stock, access to the bond market in Europe. There's loads of different things that are just perfectly packaged that can grab different people with different needs and different desires. That you're casting such a wide net, and your result is 14.5 million customers in a year, on top of spamming links about signing up, and people like you and I online as well discussing these things. We've been talking about Revolut for years. I've been singing their praises for years because it genuinely still is and was a fantastic proposition for someone, particularly from a travel perspective. And that really, I think, has been the foundation of their growth. One thing that has been unbelievable, one statistic that was unbelievable from their report, just astronomical, was that 1 trillion transactions in 2024 made through Revolut.
Have to correct you here, 1 trillion pounds in transaction volume. So assuming that the average transaction is larger than a pound, it's probably a lot less transactions in total, but it's still tremendous, right?
I just want to hop back onto the deposits, Jan, just quickly, and talk about customer deposits.
30 billion pounds. So by 66%. And that shows one thing, Jonny. That shows that people are holding more money in their accounts. And that's something that I believe the people responsible at Revolut are going to be very, very happy about, because they're on their mission to become the primary bank for the customers, because they know they need customers to hold liquid funds in there in order for them to be also actively enjoying all the other products Revolut offers. And it's great news for them, for sure. They're not quite there yet. They still, the average customer still holds much less money on their Revolut account than it's the case with traditional legacy banks.
It's an interesting calculation when you look at the average then per user deposit, because when you put it into that, it's not that substantial, it's not that impressive. So if you take 30 billion pounds in customer balances and divide that by 52 million customers, the average customer holds £571 in their Revolut account, which is, it's not a huge amount of money. And it tells you that overall customers don't see Revolut as the primary place to deposit their money, which is definitely at the heart of their mission. They want to change that.
It's going to be very difficult to build this trust, though. I think we've covered it in a previous episode. But I mean, I wish them all the best. And if a fintech can pull this off, Revolut can, for sure.
There's definitely something that they need to build trust over. And I think getting regulated, getting authorized by, for example, the Financial Conduct Authority in the UK, and then getting deposit insurance, that level of faith, trust that you'll need to encourage people to deposit, I think is generally generated from having the insurance there. That said, though, I must admit, like I deposit my business earnings, my business revenue into a Wise business account, which isn't technically insured, although it's an e-money institution. So those funds are ring-fenced and put with like legacy banks that we can pretty much have faith won't go under, hopefully. So for me personally, that doesn't necessarily drive my faith or trust in a bank. But I think for most people, they want to see that there's FSCS insurance, for example, in the UK.
Yeah, I think there's much more to it, though, Jonny. I think it's also about the peace of mind of knowing that there's someone to talk to in case something goes wrong. And Revolut in the past, they've grown so fast. There's one thing that scales not exponentially, and that's customer support, right? A lot of fintech companies, when they experience tremendous growth, they have problems keeping up with the customer support, and as a result, the customer experience suffers, right? If something goes wrong, if you have to talk to someone, there's going to be longer waiting times, and that's something that Revolut has been suffering with. If you look at the Trustpilot account, there's still, the majority of reviews are positive, right? Because they're actively encouraging customers to leave positive reviews, which any normal business would do. But there are also a lot of negative reviews of people. Maybe even a few horror stories even of people that had their funds unlocked and then they had to go into a lengthy progress in order to get them back. And I think once this is solved, right, that's when fintech banks can compete on the same level with legacy banks, right? And there will be no disadvantage over holding money with a legacy bank.
It's interesting. I must just say on behalf of Revolut as well, in their defense, I do find the customer service with legacy banks can be quite atrocious as well. You know, Barclays business bank account before I closed it was awful. One of the reasons why I closed it, you just couldn't get anyone on the phone. So there is obviously challenges all across the banking board. Doesn't matter if you're legacy or a fintech or a new bank. But you're absolutely right. There's enough comments on Reddit, Trustpilot to see where people are, most unhappy. And it's typically around customer service. It's around the closure of bank accounts. There's a lot of that happening. And I think that's definitely a lot to do with their sort of, what's the motto, like break fast and build things or something. Move fast, break fast, build. It's definitely not break fast and build things. That doesn't make any sense. But there's a motto there somewhere that's all about like continuous innovation, fast progress, build. And, we're talking about finance here. You got to slow down. And I think that's what Revolut are doing as they mature. They're slowing down and making sure that they're getting everything right. And if you look at the financial report, you'll see that the chairman, Martin Gilbert, mentions in his paragraph about looking ahead, he mentions about improving security protocols and customer service.
I believe they also mentioned that they want to use AI to solve more of those let's call them superficial requests in order for actual agents to be ready for problems that can't be solved through AI. And that's going to help as well, I assume.
I hope it helps. I mean, we've had AI customer service for a long time, or if that's what you want to call it, AI. I'm not sure if we can call it artificial intelligence, but we've had like chatbots for a long time, right? We've all encountered them. Sometimes you're just immediately trying to get past them so you can speak to someone, even if it means lying. I do that all the time. Like I type some nonsense just to try and get to someone who I can actually speak to, because I know what they're doing. They're just serving me the FAQ section. They're just like trying to work out. Yeah, that's what they're trained on. So I don't know. I hold my hope. I hold hope in the fact that Revolut are a tech company essentially with some great minds, and that they'll be able to solve the problem. And one of the things that they're looking for, if we look ahead now to the future of Revolut, one of the things they'll be looking at is artificial intelligence and how that can help their business model. And by having AI customer service, that's going to help them save money on human customer service, which is arguably a bad thing. But then they can reinvest that money in other areas. And they've also talked about an AI-driven assistant. I really can't wait to see the AI-driven assistant and what's that going to tell me, from my Revolut account, what's that going to flag? I'll be very interested to see how that's going to work. It's probably going to tell me that, why do you have this gym membership, Jonny? You haven't been in months. Things, we'll probably get things like that, but that'll be very interesting. But I do want to just sit on looking ahead, Jan, if that's okay, and just have a little bit of fun speculating about the future of Revolut for a moment before we move on, because there are a couple of things in the pipeline that I think we can see happening, and one of them is the launch of digital mortgages, which that's going to be very interesting to see how Revolut tackles mortgages in the future.
Right. Actually, as a matter of fact, they've launched a loan product for medium-sized loans in Europe a few years back. Not sure if it was 2023 or actually last year. Would have to double check. But once they acquired the banking license in Lithuania, I believe, they were able to offer this, and you can get 50,000 euros as a loan just by answering a few questions. And from everything I've heard so far, it's a pretty seamless process, which is fascinating, because with legacy banks, getting a loan, if people have tried, they'll know it's a lengthy process. It takes a lot of time, takes a lot of documentation, it takes a lot of even physically showing up into the branch and talking to people at times. And if they can simplify this, there's a huge value add here, I believe.
Yeah, not only that, there's a huge cost saving comparatively to other providers. You just said it yourself. You talked about the steps and stages involved in trying to get a loan with like a legacy bank. You've got to go to a physical place. You've got to go to a location and talk to a human. You've got to talk to a person who's got to use their hands to write stuff. Like, that's unbelievably expensive. Revolut can offer faster stress testing with AI models to check if you're, going to be able to pay the loan back or not, maybe even be able to foresee whether you'll default. And then they can offer it very quickly, and that will become more compelling, and that will encourage more people to sign up for Revolut because they may want a loan. You can just see how this all ties back to that overall goal of 100 billion in revenue, 100 million customers, 100 countries. Something that I haven't even mentioned yet that I find fascinating is the expansion into physical banking. I mean, it just doesn't make sense. I'm talking now about trying to, offering loans and being able to cut costs because you don't have humans involved, so you don't have to go to a physical bank to get a loan. But Revolut are actually talking about physical banking. They're talking about ATMs. They're talking about having physical Revolut ATMs. I don't think this is enticing or compelling because of being able to withdraw money, Jan. But where this is interesting is it's going to enable people to deposit.
Right, and that has been one of the major disadvantages of Revolut. You can't deposit any cash currently, at least not within the European Union. If I'm not totally wrong here, unless there's a partnership with a supermarket in place, but I would have to double check. But it's definitely a more complicated process than with a standard legacy bank. So there's a huge value add here, and if they can pull that off and then launch those ATMs at scale, wow, the disadvantage will disappear.
I'm waiting for the opportunity to deposit physical cash. So my partner is she's Chinese, and this is this is a packet of money that you get on birthdays, and it comes in a red packet, and I got about 300 British pounds here that's just sat on my desk. This is ridiculous. This is very irresponsible. I should be paying this in as quickly as possible. And what I've been doing to pay this in, or what I will do to pay this in, is I will take my Starling bank card to the post office and use that to pay it in, and then transfer it from my Starling account into my main savings account that I use. It's unbelievable. But I just want to, I've just jumped ahead slightly there, but I want to jump back to something that you said about who would that be for? Like, who would be depositing cash anyway? And I think that is interesting because there are definitely less and less people that have the need to, deposit cash, but that market still exists and those people are still out there. And if you're looking for, astronomical growth, endless growth, you're going to be looking at the challenges that you need to be able to resolve, and the pain problems that people might have that you can't help yet. And that's going to be one of them for them. They're just trying to think of another way that they can reach people that might not necessarily want to use Revolut because there's no ability for cash deposits. And what about tradesmen? What about people that are business people that operate in cash? There are window cleaners, there are chippies, carpenters, there are plumbers. Some of these guys are getting paid with cash as well, and they need to deposit that money. And business banking is an important part of Revolut's business plan. I think it's now accounts for, I don't want to say a random number. I might say a random number now. I think it's about 15% of revenue is coming from business banking. I think enabling cash deposits for businesses will also be quite important to them. We do have cash deposits in the UK, I should mention.
Interesting. Jonny, just out of curiosity, how does that work in the UK if you deposit cash into your Revolut account? Because in Germany, actually, fact check that, it's not possible currently.
Okay, so in the UK, last time I did this, I made a short on this. You go into your app and you just go to add money and you select cash. But yeah, you can find location on a map feature, and then once you found it, it'll generate a barcode that you can scan at the location, at the shop, and then you can deposit your money. You can deposit between £10 and £500. So they have got something in place. If we continue to look ahead for a moment before moving on, one thing that I find very interesting is the US banking license will be coming in the future. I think that's something that they're going to be looking ahead to get. That's going to be a very important part of their business model, particularly if they want to generate money from credit card spending. They can't currently offer a credit card in the US. And then finally, if anyone else is interested in potentially investing money in a public sale of Revolut shares, they will probably have an IPO.
They will, for sure. I'm very certain, but the question is when. And now, looking at the current economic uncertainty there is, it's really, really difficult to predict. And we've seen other fintechs cancel their IPO plans. Klarna, as you mentioned initially, they just did it in April. If I had to predict a time, I'd probably say mid to end 2026. That's my gut feeling, but it could be way later. It could be a little earlier. I guess time will tell. But yeah, an IPO is obviously a huge opportunity always. But for an IPO to be successful, you need the market segment to be positive, right? If people are fearing a recession, for example, they're not going to be so hyped on Revolut going public at its current valuation. And then the stock price might tank initially. And that's something you definitely don't want to happen at an IPO.
I believe it was 2021 when the stock market, the IPO market was going gangbusters. You had some huge IPOs. I remember when Deliveroo IPO'd at some ridiculous valuation and never really recovered. A similar scenario where it kind of crashed shortly after. Yeah, Revolut's valuation at the moment is huge, and it doesn't really make sense in terms of the revenue they're generating. So maybe another financial report beforehand, really another successful year of accounting could then work as the foundation for an IPO. But I just quickly want to discuss, it's a very small article from Sifted, this idea of Revolut's reward credit card. I'd love to hear from our listeners as well and viewers what you would think about this. But Revolut are reportedly looking at a rewards-based credit card that helps you earn rev points from your spending. There would be different tiers for different plans, standard, I don't know, depending where you are, plus, premium, metal, ultra. You'll have your credit card and you'll be able to earn more points. And this could be the beginning of US market penetration, because they'll need a credit card in the US. This could be a great way to test it in the UK and Europe. But what I find most interesting, Jan, is Europe. Because of regulation, the merchant fees, so the fees that Revolut can charge merchants for taking a transaction with one of their cards, are a lot lower in Europe. Correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe they're 0.3% versus the UK, which is roughly 1.5 to 3%. So how are Revolut going to introduce a rewards-based credit card in Europe and make it profitable? That's going to surely come at a loss.
Then they might decide to do this at a loss at first, just in order to keep this growth momentum going, right? Because a credit card that brings excellent rewards is obviously going to be attractive for a lot of people, which is going to drive a lot of customers to Revolut. Which will then result in them potentially hitting their growth targets, or make it easier at least. One thing I know for sure, Jonny, in case they decide to launch a credit card and have plans for the credit card to really be a channel of growth for them, they do need to work on their rewards-based system. Redemption rate, exactly. The redemption rate of rev points or the current plans, it's pretty bad, right? We've discussed it in last week's episode. It doesn't make sense for most people. So for a credit card to make sense, they definitely have to step up the game. And I'm thinking, at least 1 to 2 rev points per pound spent in order for the credit card to make sense.
Okay, so I'd just like to round off the episode with some of the interest rates that we've got from the UK, at least from April the 29th, which is today. I'll put a little table up on the screen for you. But some of the top easy access savings accounts, we have Chip. They're offering 4.76% with a minimum £1 deposit and an 85,000 maximum balance. That's probably one of the most limited savings accounts in terms of maximum balances. Atom Bank have a 4.75 and you can deposit up to 100,000. But remember that these are variable rates, so they could change at any point. So you want to keep an eye on that. And if you think Chip and Atom Bank aren't well known enough, Marcus by Goldman Sachs, they have 4.3%, and Kahoot, which is owned by Santander, have 4.41%. I would say with Kahoot, though, the interface, I had an easy access account with them. The interface, the whole thing is pretty archaic. Like if you forget your password or your security number, for example, they have to send you 2 letters in the post and they take ages to arrive. So just be mindful of that. If you're interested in Kahoot and that 4.41%, they still use like the postal service for security stuff. Chase UK just boosted their saver account. I signed up to it yesterday. If you go on the Chase UK website, you should see that they're offering 4.75% for 6 months. And then it returns to the variable standard rate, which currently is 3%. And with Chase UK, you can deposit up to £3 million and you can have one saver account per customer. So if you have more than £3 million, you'll have to look elsewhere, but you probably shouldn't be depositing £3 million in there. And the interest is paid monthly. And you'll need a Chase UK current account. We also have some fixed rate savings. Synergy Bank have a fixed 1-year savings account. So that means the interest rate won't change for a year. 2, 3, 5-year fixes, longer term fixes just aren't that compelling at the moment. So I haven't put any other fixes on the table. And then we have easy access cash ISAs, which currently are up to £20,000. But the UK government might be reducing that to as little as £4,000. Martin Lewis of Money Saving Expert had an interesting video on this. I'll put it in the description box below if you're suddenly panicking about your ISA. Trading 212, they have a ISA of 5.07%, and Plum as well have 5.06%. And if you like a well-known name, again, Marcus by Goldman Sachs have 4.3%. So Trading 212, Plum, and Marcus, those three are variable, so those rates may change at any time. If you want a fixed rate, you can get one for 4.27% that locks you in for a year. But Charter Savings Bank, who I just opened an easy access account with, relatively good system, has a 4.27% ISA. Charter are good though. Yeah, it seems pretty straightforward. You just deposit the money from a registered bank account into your Charter Savings account and it works pretty seamlessly. And as far as I can tell, they're not using the post office for password requests. That's it. Jan, do you want to outro the pod?
Yeah. How do you typically do that? Do you have an outro script, or do you just go ahead and?
No. I just talk absolute nonsense. So it usually goes something like this. Well, that's everything that we have for today. Hope you enjoyed the podcast. If you're watching this on YouTube, I hope you enjoyed the video. Please do subscribe to the channel. It would be amazing if you could subscribe. It would be amazing if you could give us a like. There are only very few ways you can currently support Jan and I. We've not really monetized this podcast, and nor are we planning on in the imminent future. So if you'd like to support us, please just drop a subscribe on the channel, like this video, comment, or send it to someone. Perhaps if you know someone who's interested in Revolut or is interested in savings accounts, because we have the roundup at the end of each recap episode, send it around, and we'll see you next week on another episode of Banking Without Borders. I'm Jonny. It's been a pleasure to talk to you, and my co-host Jan.
Yeah, thanks everyone for listening. It was a pleasure, Jonny. Thanks for having me, and see you.